G'day folks, well my name's Vaughan McVilly and I'm from the Mental Wheels Foundation and I'm part of the team that's bringing you the Sit Up Challenge. This year, in September 1st, we're going to be challenging you to do 66 sit-ups for 21 days and invite 6 of your friends to also join in that challenge. Why all the 6s? It's not an evil number. The reason why we chose all the 6s is because every 6 minutes in Australia, someone attempts to take their own life. And so we want to reduce that number and bring the suicide rate in Australia down to 0. How are we going about that at the Mental Wheels Foundation? Well, the funds that we raise goes towards research and programs that help people suffering from anxiety and depression. We've partnered with Macquarie University and mindspot.org where we have funded clinical trials, and we've also done a lot of work around providing programs to people who really need that in their life. With the average, funds raised by people of $66, there's those 6s again. If we get 6 people to raise $66, that's $396. Why is that number important? Well, that's exactly how much it costs mindspot.org to provide someone with an assessment and then an 8-week program that can get them back into a positive mental health space. Each week, when the next few days leading up to the 1st of September, I'm going to be getting the chance to talk to some amazing humans and some special ambassadors of the Mental Wheels Foundation. And then during the first 21 days of September, every day we're going to be crossing live to different people around Australia and around the world to tell us about their mental health journey and what they're doing to increase their positive mental health. Today, I'm super duper chuffed and excited to be chatting to former professional cyclist, former Australian National Road Champion in 2018, and she's now a mentor and a life coach, Shannon Malseed. I'm going to invite her on here. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about her career and then what she's doing now and go from there. So, as long as the technology works. Shannon had an amazing career on the bike and is now a professional life coach and mentor. There she is. How you going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really, really well. Obviously, I've given you a little bit of a intro already, but I guess, from racing on 2 wheels to guiding people through the twists and turns of life, tell us about your experience as a pro cyclist and how that prompted you to now helping people navigate their own pathways in their life.
I actually love that, the twists and turns of life. Look, when I had ambition to become a professional cyclist, you see it up in these like fancy lights and you think that the world of professional cycling is going to be so amazing, and the number one goal is just like to get there, and it's tunnel vision to get there, and that's what I had. And then when you turn pro as an Australian, you're totally like removed away from your people. So I'd been overseas a little bit, but it was the first time I'd been away from my family for that long. So 9 months of the year in a different country. Thankfully, a lot of it was America. So I was at least speaking the same language. But it was racing and travel and racing and travel. I think every single race that I did the first year that I was pro was a world tour race, so the highest level. And I was getting absolutely smashed to pieces. So there was a lot of like a reality check for me that I didn't really handle super well, going off the back of winning nationals at the start of the year. So then getting absolutely like smashed in the pro peloton. I got burnt out, and I pretty much repeated that year with small improvements on repeat for the next few years, where I would, train really hard, have a great summer, go into the European racing scene, get burnt out, come home, fall into a hole of depression, and do it all over again. But I guess the journey coming to an end was for many different reasons. Yes, my mental health, also my the way that I was, my body image and the way that I was unhealthily eating, and sort of had some health concerns with that, and looking at my long-term health, wanting to start a family, all of that sort of stuff coming into it. and then also knowing that I had this really strong calling to help people, and I didn't feel like I was fulfilling that in cycling. I was always the person that you would go to and be like a shoulder to cry on, or just express yourself, and I feel like I could always hold people through that. And I was mentoring a cycling team as well. One thing led to the other. Here I am coaching, and I absolutely would not change it for the world. I love what I do now, and it's just, yeah, a really special thing. So anyway, that's a long story.
That's great. And so how long have you been doing the mentoring and coaching for now?
So this is, I think, coming up like 3.5 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I pretty much
and I guess
went
it's
straight into it.
Yeah, right. And, you know, I think as we've had a few chats this week, life can get pretty busy for people. And as I guess, and balance is key. Let's be honest, we're both on the bike and off the bike. And it's someone who has mastered both, you know, when you're helping individuals to find that equilibrium between continuing to push harder and then potentially taking a breather, you know, what are some of the things you're telling your clients?
Oh, wow. This is a huge question. And the reason it's huge is because I still struggle with this. Like, I still get in the mode of like the tunnel vision that I spoke about before, where it's like I've got a goal and nothing is going to get in my way. But what I'm learning, and I'm also teaching my clients, is, and this is the thing about coaching, right? We've always got to be the embodiment of it first, like going through it first before you can be the transmission of that. You can tell people knowledge all day long. We all know that we need to slow down, but there's a difference between being the knowledge giver, like a teacher, and actually being the embodiment of that, so people can feel it, and it hits different, right? So what I'm learning is how it is so much more productive to slow down. And again, everyone listening to this is going to know that intellectually, but it's a different thing when you feel it. So something really as simple as going to the beach every day. Like, I live 500 meters from the most beautiful coastline in the world, in my opinion. And it's the Great Ocean Road, so I'm probably not far from the truth. But going and like seeing the ocean every day, or putting my feet in the sand, then sets me up for like such a better day. And also spending time with my family, things like this, like taking 5-minute breaks during the day where I can just go outside and breathe. All of those things we know we should be doing, but we're not doing them. And that's what's leading to the burnout and so forth, and the mental health issues that come off the back of that too. Yeah, and I know that you know a lot about this. So.
Yeah, I think it's a very common thing, right? Like, a lot of people seem to get into that rut. If I just need to work harder, if I just work this a little bit harder today, if I just work this a little bit harder, and it just becomes this spiral of working harder. And even as you've so perfectly said, that we all know that you should probably just try and, you know, take a breath, slow down, stop, and work smarter. You can quite easily get into that work harder and harder and harder. And if I was to maybe even, you know, flip that on its head, you know, I think, you know, the beauty about what's happening in the cycling world at the moment with women's cycling is we got to see all of the tour stages of the Tour de France Femme this year live, and just see how crazy and hectic that can be. And like, you know, as far as strategy and agility and adaptability are such a crucial thing in the pro peloton, right? Like, stuff can change so quickly, a crash can happen, you can be positioned wrong, and so on and so forth. You know, that's sort of the same in life, right? Whether that's, you know, you suddenly lose someone, you lose your job, the company you work for goes bust, and you're suddenly out of your job. What are some of the, I guess, tools and stuff that you use for yourself, and maybe give to your clients to shift gears and take on those uphill battles?
You know, I feel like it's just knowing that you're more than just a XYZ. So you're more than just a cyclist. You're more than just an athlete. You're more than just a business owner. You're more than just a dad or a mum or a brother, sister. whatever it is. You are more than that. And the more that we are allowing our soul to do the talking for us, and when I say that, what I mean is we're getting whispers all day long for what you truly desire. And that might be, again, like I said, this is really relevant for me right now because it's something that I'm doing every day, but going to the beach, like I can feel that within me, and it makes me more than just a coach. It makes me more than just a mum and more than just this. So if tomorrow, I don't know, something happened, I couldn't coach anymore, I would still have all of these other things that I know bring me life, and I would still be able to find the fulfillment in that. But we also have to allow ourselves to grieving that loss of, if it's a person, if it's a career, if it's your old self. If you're allowing yourself to grieve that, you're actually allowing yourself to move through it and acknowledge it as, yeah, it hurts. And yeah, that I'm going to miss that. And I do miss that, versus suppressing it. And then it all, we know that it is just going to create a snowball. And yeah, I think we've become out of touch as a society with expressing our true feelings. And I think a lot of the work that I do and, you know, the Mental Wheels Foundation Sit Up Challenge is advocating for is being able to reintroduce ourselves into what is that work that we've distanced ourselves from, and how do we come back to naturally becoming our own life coach or becoming our own best friend, and what are the things that we can do to help with that. Yeah, so
Yeah, great. My dad used to say to me a lot. So my dad was a 6 times Aussie cycling champion, 3 times on the road and 3 times on the track. And then I started racing and training and just living. And one of my dad's sayings was, you know, like when you're really, really hurting in a race situation, have a look around because probably everybody else is hurting too. If I can flip your mind back to those last couple of laps of that 2018 national titles, you know, listening to the commentary, you know, the commentators were probably starting to write you off a little bit. There was a couple of times where it did look like you were deep in the hurt locker. You know, what were you going through mentally, and what, you know, that final, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it, was amazing. What was going through your mind? You know, you know, and then do you use some of those things to give to your clients, I guess?
it's such an it's such an interesting example, because obviously I came out on top, right? In that moment, there was nothing else going through my mind. And this is what we talk about, flow, right?
Flow,
when you're in
yeah.
flow, there's just, and if it's on the bike, it's just you and the bike. It's just you and the bike race. I did not, and I say this in the most loving way, but I didn't give a shit about anyone else in that race. I could not care less. I didn't actually have any other teammates, so I was in every right to not care about anyone else. But you know, I had friends out on the road, and I was pushing them out of the way to get the best position for that sprint. I remember telling Grace Brown, who is now like on top of the world in cycling, I remember telling her to get out of my way, like move now, because I've got this wheel, this is mine. And that's what won me the sprint in the end. Like I got the right wheel, and I won the sprint. But the thing that I also use as an example in that race with my clients and with the work that I do is that I was still the same person when I crossed that finish line. So all the problems that I had beforehand, all of the self-doubt, all of the, like I spoke about before, the body image issues that I had, all of the pressure to perform, all of this lack of belief in myself, can I really do it? That was still there, right? I won the race, but I didn't get rid of all of my problems in the process of doing that. So it's a great reminder to us that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And also success on paper does not mean that you are living that success from the inside out. And so I talk a lot about with my clients what it looks like to live from the inside out and create success from that space. And yeah, so I guess that race, it is significant in many ways, and in many ways that you probably don't see at face value, I think, as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
fantastic, thank you. And then if I can wind the clock forward and say maybe in the first 6 months after you hung up the bike, you're a huge advocate for vulnerability and your videos. And if anyone out there doesn't follow Shannon on Instagram, you should definitely do it. There's daily posts that are inspiring. What did you do for that first 6 months? Like, was that, is as far as harder times, were there harder times on the bike or harder times off the bikes pre and post cycling career?
I think my experience is unique again, as everyone's is. And I know that a lot of people don't choose to retire. So this might be different in that sense. But I made that choice. So I actually felt incredibly free and empowered too, because I made that decision without asking anyone else's opinion, which is probably the first time that I had done that in my life, because a lot of what I did was to please others. And you know, especially my dad, who was my number one fan, it was like I always wanted to make sure dad was proud of me. And I never asked for his opinion. I never asked for anyone's opinion. And I always have to shout out to my partner, Blake, when I talk about my retirement, because he's not a cyclist, and he was there for me, helping me through that transition in a way that opened me up to a world outside of cycling. So it was also COVID, and so we had a lot of time to adventure. Like, we weren't in lockdown where we were, and the rest of Victoria, like Melbourne, was in massive lockdown. So we felt a little bit free in the sense that I didn't have work. Blake didn't have work because his work wasn't operating. And so we were just like, let's go and do some fun stuff. And so that really helped. And then it was probably a bit delayed, the whole identity switch and the whole, it's only really recently, like it's raw for me, that I've brought myself back into loving cycling. And like I said to you last night, I just allowed myself to watch cycling for the first time. This is like 3.5 years later. And that brought up so many feelings for me initially of like, man, I could still be doing that if I had have just pushed myself a little bit more. If I had have, if, you know, I had more in me physically, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. And so it's been a process, even these last few weeks, of me just reminding myself that it was a choice that I made based off what my heart and my soul wanted at that time. And I still wouldn't change it for the world. You know, I've got a beautiful family. I love what I do now. But there is that part of me that still is moving through that little bits of grief of losing that old version of myself. So I think, yeah, it's a convoluted, as it always is for everyone, there's many layers. But yeah, I think I would keep it back to give people advice for who might be retiring or making a transition in their life, is allowing yourself to grieve that old version of you and keeping it fun, keeping the enjoyment in the next phase of what you're doing. Is super important, I feel.
Yeah, the grieving thing's an interesting and hits home really hard for me. And funnily how timing works, like only like 2 weeks ago, I went out and met up with an old friend who I hadn't sort of caught up with for a long time. And we were, I guess, colleagues, and so not super close friends, but we're just colleagues and mates. And it was like, hey, come out, let's catch up. And we were having a beer and in a pub, and he came back with a beer and sat it down. First beer, second question, how long did it take you to grieve your father? I was like, wow, that's full on. And I was like, right. So I sort of talked to him a bit about that and my experience. And I went, but I need to ask, why are you asking that? And he goes, well, Mum died now, 4 years ago. And I know that I still haven't grieved the loss of my mum. And I'm thinking, shit, I probably need to do that, don't I? And I was like, dude. And so we end up having this beautiful, long conversation about grief. And I was the same. It took me a long time to grieve the loss of my father. And I did a whole heap of things, that trying to make your father proud or your parents proud. I mean, I bloody wrote a song about that, about standing in my father's shadow and wanting to be able to live up to that, to that, the expectations that I made. No one else made. He didn't make them. My mother didn't make them. I guess the expectations of success and the man who I wanted to grow up to be, it took me a long time to work out who that was, and then how that grief worked. And as soon as that happened, and I had to go to a very dark space to get there. Like the road from there onwards, my partner Sammy has been a huge part of that as well. Has been just the best life, and I'm so grateful and I feel blessed every day for even just having this conversation with you and reaching out to you and saying, hey, you interested, and you going yes. I was like, I'm not going to drop an F-bomb. Not going to drop an F-bomb live. Come on, Vaughan, you can do this. Really interesting. And then obviously just jumping into the work that I'm doing now with the Mental Wheels Foundation. On Wednesday night, I caught up with Professor Nick Titov, who's the head of psychology for Macquarie University. And he's sort of the guy that we, as far as the foundation is concerned, we really connected with when we were looking about, okay, we want to do something about, suicide and mental health, 4 or 5 years ago when the foundation started by the founders. And it's like, who do we partner with and why? And, what Macquarie University do, and then in line with mindspot.org, which is connected, is quite amazing, because their research, that they then feed that research straight into Mindspot. And Mindspot, for anyone out there who doesn't know, mindspot.org, whack it in your phone if it's for you and or if it's for a friend. It's the Australian first and only free mental health clinic. You can go on, fill in an assessment, and you can get an 8-week program. And as I was saying before about the sit-up challenge, $396 is what the cost is. It doesn't cost, it's totally free, but that's why we raise money and try and give it to them. So we caught up with Nick just this week, and the first clinical trial we did was called The Things You Do. It was a male-only cohort, the first ever male-only cohort in regards to suicide, and it was like 4 years ago. That sounds ridiculous, but it's true. But we then also very quickly realised that although the suicide rate is definitely male focused, the suicide attempts rate is actually closer together. And so we decided from year one, we were a male, only mental health foundation, and we quickly removed that. It's like we're a mental health foundation to raise money for research. And then out of that, 3 years later, out of that, those clinical trials and that clinical research, they've got the thing called the Big Five, which I've obviously told you about. And again, just to explain that, so basically out of the research of The Things You Do, they've worked out that there's 5 main things that you should be doing every day to have positive mental health. And they're continuing to prove that now, because obviously it's one thing to get to a point. Now we need to retest and retest and retest. And so those 5 things are: 1, meaningful activities; 2, healthy thinking; 3, goals and plans; 4, healthy routines; and 5, social connections. And one of the cool things that we learnt on Wednesday night was that when you're down, you got to do all of those as individual things. But when you're up, you're sort of doing them all at once. And my example of that is on Wednesday morning, I said to Nick, I went out gravel riding with my mates, and we went out for a ride. There was 3 of us. We were talking shit, and then we went and had a coffee, and one of my mates, Robbie Allen, goes to me, morning, we just ticked off 3 of the Big 5 in one foul swoop, and we're like, yeah. And he's Nick's like, yeah, that's fantastic. All right. He said, but however, if you guys are in a more negative state, you need to be separating those things and ticking them off each day. And they're now proving that people who are doing them once or not at all, or once or twice a day, are actually falling below that depression line. So So we're really passionate now about the big five, and then trying to help out how, as you so rightly put earlier on, we all know what they are. It's like that old adage, like, why do people smoke, or why do people eat fatty foods? Or we know that they're fatty for us, but we end up quite easily end up going there and nearly forming a habit of doing things that aren't positive for our mental health. So, so that's a little bit more about, I guess, the Mental Wheels Foundation and what we're doing, and with the Sit Up Challenge. Now, Shannon, are you ready for our fast big five questions?
Can I ask you first?
Yes.
Was part of the reason, well, I'd love to actually just know why you started the Mental Wheels Foundation yourself. Like, what brought you into this? What's your story? Is it part of like grieving a father, or is it cycling related? Like, yeah, how'd you get here?
So, in all truth, before my father passed away, I had a very, I guess, small foundation that I was starting myself called Big Dog for the Black Dog, which was getting the mates who were sad, chucking into the big chain ring and bashing each other on the bike for a little while, and then having a coffee and laughing about it. That was just rolling along down in Tassie. And I was not ashamed to say I was heavily against suicide, and I used to think that it was the weak way out. And I was sort of pretty passionate about that. I thought it was, and I lost quite a few close friends when I was young to suicide, when I was in my early late teens. And then I lost a cousin of mine. Had a horrific story where he hung himself in the garage, and all of those. And although I was obviously very upset, I used to get angry about it. Yeah. But it wasn't until I started a business down in Tassie after my father. It was a cycling tourism business. I was gun-ho, very confident, overconfident, and of course that business failed. And it was obviously not just the failing of a lot of money out of my bank account and the people who were backing me. It was also failing, obviously, because I was building a business in my father's name. And so one night, out of the blue, really, I'd grabbed the rope out of the shed and walked up the top of the hill, and I tried to hang myself. The rope didn't completely break, but it was an old rock climbing rope. It wasn't a very smart move by me. Some prior planning would have been a good idea, but fortunately what happened is that it stretched enough for it not to completely asphyxiate me, and I woke up however long staring up in the clouds, and then I thought, I'm a bit fucked. Excuse the language, but that was my first thing. Like, there's an issue here that I didn't recognise, and I had no real thoughts about suicide or anything, but it just ended up being the last. For me, at that point in my life, it ended up being the last way out. And in hindsight, it was just such a stupid place to be. But now, doing the work I do, I know how I got there, because it was just slowly but surely doing the wrong things. I was drinking more and more. My business was right next door to a brewery. That wasn't a good idea. Like, I'd stopped riding my bike. I know that that's bad for my mental health, because I just love being on my bike, whether that's a BMX, a mountain bike, bloody unicycle, right? So all of these things that I'd stopped doing, my mental health just plummeted really, really, really quickly. And then I found I was in that space. And so, even though I was still running these things once a week, Big Dog for the Black Dog, that was the only time I'd ride my bike. We'd ride out to Mona and back and stuff with people. And so that was sort of, I guess, the catalyst to do something for myself and change around. I got onto a really good psych initially, and then I now catch up with a mentor every fortnight, and we do that. And she's amazing. We just talk out shit every fortnight. She's completely separated from my life. I'm completely separated for her, which is great, because then there's no I know that person or I don't know that person type situation. And then obviously got involved with the guys at the Mental Wheels Foundation, and that was completely by chance. I literally I came back to Sydney after the business failed, and I started getting my shit together. And I needed a job. My mate gave me a job, and I was out selling coffee products. I sat down opposite this guy and said, I need to sell you some coffee products. And straight away we went, hang on a minute, we know each other. And we worked out we'd known each other 20 years beforehand when I was a franchise consultant. And I don't know, even know how we got on to talking about cycling and depression and suicide, but we did. And then 4 hours later, for that little half an hour meeting that we had, suddenly I was like, all right, I'll volunteer for your next tour, the Mental Wheels tour. And that was literally 5 weeks later, and boom, I was in the Mental Wheels Foundation. So there's a long story cut short, but yeah.
Yeah, wow. I thank you for sharing that so openly with everyone, and I think that's a big tearjerker. Yeah, it hits you really hard when you go from that space of not even knowing what depression is to, well, actually, I think that I have that thing that you call depression. And I remember that first, meeting with my sports psych too, where my cycling coach at the time, recommended that I see a psych. And when he said to me that word that he think I had, I think you might have, I just wanted to end the call then and there. It was like this big shame around it. Like, please don't label me. And I got really angry too. I was like, pretty much, fuck you. Like, how dare you say that to me?
Yeah.
And so I can relate closely to that feeling of anger. And with the work I do now as well, what I've learned too is that what sits underneath anger 99.9% of the time is sadness. Is that gut-wrenching, like, we're not angry, we're sad, but we're expressing it as anger. And sometimes we need to do that, and it's really healthy to just get that anger out, so then we can get underneath to what is really causing it. And oftentimes when we kick into that sadness and we allow ourselves to express that, then we can move forward into, okay, now I can do something about it. And that's what we get to with the work you're doing, with the work I'm doing, with the work we're doing together, is to be able to get people to that space, which I'm really, really excited and proud and honoured to be a part of it as well.
Unreal. Yeah, thank you. It's funny, that whole anger piece is really interesting for me as well, because I think I found that my anger came out with, really bizarrely. Well, not bizarrely. It just came out. I'm a really happy guy. I'm always smiling. Everyone who knows me for probably the main thing. They'll go, oh, Vaughan McVilly or Macca, they'll go, yow, because I'm always yelling that out, whether it's past my mate's house or, like, I'm always this super up guy, right? And so I literally went from walking down the hill, I threw the rope into the shed, and I kept a small part of the rope and I put it in my hoodie pocket. I went and laid down, and I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, like I did the last however many days, and went into my little pop-up cycling cafe in Hobart, and on the outside, everyone knew that I probably wasn't great, but they wouldn't have thought that the last 12 hours of my life was the way that it was. But then I became even more like the smiling Cheshire cat, and like even more up, because I had to put on this facade. And I actually named it the performing seal syndrome, which is no such thing. It's a Vaughan McVillyism, which you don't actually listen to that. But that was how I had to explain to my head, like above the water, I was a seal. I was balancing balls on my nose. I was happy, fun. I was making sure everyone was okay, and like, rah, and idiot really, like in hindsight. But below the water, I was the saddest I'd ever been. And angry at myself, angry at myself that I didn't succeed in committing suicide. Like, how crazy is that, right? Calling myself a fat bastard because the rope broke, didn't organise it properly. Oh, that's the same as this and the same as that. And it's like, and it wasn't until I started moving through some help and getting some advice that I went, right. And one of the reasons why I asked you about, I guess, balance, and we talked about it earlier about being busy, is I got back to Sydney, and Sammy's like, Sammy is my partner, and she goes, we're going to Bali. I'm like, oh, wow, cool. So we jumped on a plane. We went to Bali. We checked in like at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I was pretty tired. I laid down. I went to sleep. I woke up the next day at 2:30 p.m. I went down, had a bite to eat, went back up, laid down. I woke up the following day at 10 a.m. and I slept and I slept and I slept for 3 days. I missed the first 3 days of the holidays because I just slept, which was why we were there. But it really proved to me that, like, I had totally emptied the tank and hadn't allowed myself to recover. And now I'm doing that between the hours of, I'm an early starter. I get up at sort of 5:30 every day. But in the afternoon at sort of 2:30, 3 o'clock, I'm like down, nap, like rightio, let's, constantly recharging the batteries, especially when I'm in that busy mode, because I know that otherwise I'm just going to burn out. And as we said, this weekend, it's like tools down.
Yeah.
My guys who are on the racing team, you guys go off and race. Here's the keys to the car.
Yeah.
Have fun. I'm going to sleep and hang out with my partner and my dog and just chill out,
Yeah.
So, interesting.
So important.
Yeah.
So important. All right.
Cool. All right, you ready? Are you psyched?
I'm ready.
Okay. So it's the fast big fives, remembering the big 5 questions. What is one thing that you try to do every day that you truly believe in?
Go outside in nature.
Name one thing that happened this week that was less than perfect, but perfectly okay.
My baby not sleeping when I wanted him to.
What is one goal you set and then achieved that gave you a lot of fulfillment this week?
I wanted 30 people to sign up to my workshop.
Give me one part of your morning and evening routine that you can't live without.
Stretching like for 5 minutes.
Tell me, that's the bloody pro cyclist coming out here. Tell me about one conversation that you had this week that made you feel really good.
The one with you.
Yeah. Thanks. So there you go. Yeah. They're the top 5 things that you should be doing every day. And that's the big 5. And that's why I wanted to say it. So now let's talk about your workshop. You've got a workshop this weekend. And for everyone who's out there who's going to see this video, we're giving the opportunity to go and do a workshop with Shannon for free. Tell us about it. Go.
It is. It's a free 2-day workshop with me, Saturday, Sunday. It's on overcoming self-doubt. So breaking free from the overthinking and the self-doubt, imposter syndrome, specifically targeted at high achievers too, that are always, beating themselves up for not being good enough. And working out the tools, the daily strategies that we can put in place, and also more importantly, the root cause of your self-doubt specifically for each individual. So you can just check out the link in my bio and register for free. Super easy, super breezy. You can also go into the running to win a 1 month of free coaching with me as well when you sign up. So that's pretty exciting too.
Unreal. Thank you so much. That half an hour went so quickly. Well, it did for me anyway.
It did.
Would love to do this again soon, as we spoke about during the sit-up challenge. Be fantastic to get you to come back one morning, do some sit-ups and some stretching if you bloody well have to. It's the one thing as a human being I'm just so shit at. My physio yesterday, she was like going, dude, if you don't start stretching, I'm just going to stop seeing you. Like, you're just useless. But so I'm going to put that on my... It's not
about the stretching for me, though.
Sorry?
It's not about the stretching. It's about for me, it's about slowing down and having 5 minutes to myself. Yeah. That's more what it's about. But yes, I call it stretching.
Yeah. I did a video about, I don't know, a couple of months ago where I was like, you know what? Like, my dog wakes up in the morning and literally does a downward dog and then does this weird sort of thing with her back legs and stretches them out. And she's like, oh, yeah. All right. And then she's like, let's go. She's a border collie, right? So and I'm like, oh my God. And then we had horses at our property when I grew up, and the horses were the same. When they first got up, they do this little mini yoga thing when they get going. I'm like, should be telling you something there, Vaughan. Maybe some morning stretching would be good for you. Classic.
Yeah.
All right, Shannon. Thank you so much. And go and check out Shannon's Instagram and sign up for her workshop this weekend. And we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Yow.
Bye.
Yow.